did a video the other day about the new adventure anthology book, the Candlekeep Mysteries, or maybe not the, just Candlekeep Mysteries, but there was an aspect of the book that I missed. But through just happenstance, they were brought to my attention. First, an item popped up on my Twitter feed about a creator who I guess was receiving a backlash about including either elevators or some kind of accessibility tools or mechanisms in their dungeon. It came up as part of the general D&D RPG items that Twitter will sometimes surface for me, so I didn't connect it with Candlekeep, and I just thought, okay, that's interesting and unfortunate that people are complaining about it, but I didn't put it into any sort of further context. Last night I also had my game, the game that I run, which I'm way behind doing updates for, but I'm going to do, or at least recaps, but I'm going to plan a big one as soon as I can stack away the time to do it. In any event, one of the players mentioned Candlekeep, not precisely by name, but just as far as there being a new book coming out. That was interesting. And also the fact that there were minis, and I don't recall if they made the connection that the minis were for Candlekeep, but that they had wheelchairs. And again, okay, interesting, but didn't put it together still. But then this morning, and I forget where this popped up, but I was shared, or an article from Polygon was shared with me, which then I think seemed to put the pieces together, which was talking about Candlekeep as the new book that's coming out, but also a little bit about accessibility in Candlekeep. And I think one of the authors, or the main author that they referenced as part of this, was, I believe, the one whose Twitter post had been put into my feed talking about accessibility. The main point I want to bring up here, when we have games with dragons and multiplanar adventures and magic and all kinds of creatures and other things, it seems that we can allow some space in our fantasy for differently abled people or people with accessibility issues. In the real world, maybe it was something that wasn't dealt with much, but that doesn't mean that in our fantasy worlds it can't be. But one thing that I did want to point out in this particular video is that while accessibility, I'm not going to pretend it was something that the game really has tried to address at all, really through all of its history, I think folks who may be looking at including things such as ramps or elevators may be a little bit misplaced in their ire. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to flip open my copy, which I have right here, of the Underworld and Wilderness Adventures. This is, was this book 2? No, sorry, volume 3. Volume 3 of the 3 brown books, the original iteration of D&D. I don't know see, this one's copyright 1974. I forget exactly which version this is. If we flip to the first page, we see that they've put a handy-dandy cross-section of a dungeon. You'll notice in that cross-section, there are stairs, and there are what they call slanted passageways, ramps, essentially. They didn't mean these ramps as accessibility features, but certainly in the modern times we can reinterpret them that they could have been for accessibility purposes. There are lots of things that work much better on ramps than they do on stairs, not just things like wheelchairs, but anything wheeled, or as I think somebody pointed out in a Facebook group, which might have been where I saw the Polygon article, is that creatures with different limbs or different physiologies might operate much better in ramps than they would in stairs, which makes sense. Whenever I see my cats try to climb stairs, I think about, oh yeah, they probably would appreciate a ramp. And ramps are actually fairly important in the old school mega dungeon design, because part of the trickiness of them, and tricky enough that dwarves had an ability to detect slanting passageways, was which level of the dungeon you're on is super important in terms of the monsters you can expect to encounter. The thing with ramps is it can fool you potentially if you don't catch them, if they have a slight enough grade that you are on say level 1, when in reality is you've been going down and down towards level 3. So actually ramps serve an important purpose in terms of the trickiness of a dungeon. The next thing I want to go to, just to finish this off, is the sample level, which is on the next page. The sample level of the dungeon includes a very interesting trap, and it's labeled as, if you have your sample map from this book at home, you can follow along. I believe it's number 5. And number 5, the explanation, which is on the page that faces it says, the combinations here are really vicious, and unless you're out to get your players, it is not suggested for actual use. Passage South D is a slanting corridor which will take them at least one level deeper, and if the slope is gentle, even dwarves won't recognize it. Room E is a transporter, 2 ways to just about anywhere the referee likes, including the center of the Earth or the moon. I'll just stop there. There's a little bit further where there's another passage that is a one-time transporter, but the concept here is pretty clear. We have a ramp and an elevator. A transporter is essentially an elevator. It doesn't look in our modern sense like an elevator, but the idea is essentially the same, right? It takes you from one level, and in fact, it's an improved elevator in the sense it's more like the great glass elevator, and that it's, it's a transporter, it's a teleporter. Anywhere in the universe, anywhere in the plane, perhaps to another plane you could go. This is from the very beginning of the hobby. Obviously, Arneson had his game going prior to this, and there were things, but essentially this is D&D Prime, and we have essentially an elevator and a ramp, and in fact, they put the elevator and the ramp together to create, of course, in their minds, it was a trap. But again, if one mad magician creates it as a trap to lure unsuspecting adventurers in their dungeon, or their part of the dungeon in any case, there is no reason why a more benevolent magic user or skilled craftsmen, masons, dwarves, could not have built similar structures for accessibility purposes, because perhaps there was a famous king who was wheelchair bound or couldn't walk very well, or had to be carried on a sled or a cart or a sedan and around the dungeon, or their castle or wherever. So it makes perfect sense that to build for this particular person out of reverence, or just simply because they were paid to, they might build something with ramps, and they might use elevators, or in this case, what do they call it? Two-way transporter to move things around that would be either unable to or just a pain in the butt to move around otherwise. So there you have the beginning of the hobby, elevators and ramps. So I would just say to anyone who is complaining, I don't even know why one would complain. I really don't want to read the Twitter replies that are somehow trying to shame or complain or do anything negative about this, but you can go back to the beginning of the hobby and those tools are present. If you really don't like it for whatever reason, simply skip that adventure, rewrite it if you want to. But I think if you are trying to suggest that this stuff is somehow alien to the game and the game is being ruined or turned into something it's not supposed to be, or how it doesn't fit, blah, 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 well, the tools have already been there. They've been there since 1972. So there it is. Just wanted to cover that as usual. Be safe, game on, and I will talk to you later.